So we're on the second storyline, and we've already reached the one I'm most conflicted on. Get Some, issues 7 through 10. In my view, simultaneously the weakest of the arcs, but also great for world building and in particular character building for Huey, but also for Billy and MM as well. Even if it does contain Garth Ennis' signature wordy world building. And also a really great story about the complexities surrounding prejudice. Take notes, mister. Cancer wasn't cured because the person who invented the cure was black. Somebody wrote that. Somebody actually sat down and fucking wrote that. So, if this story has such great stuff in it, why do I consider it the weakest? Well, the tech night element of the story. I really don't know what Ennis was going for here. Was he even going for anything, or was it just a joke? I presume there was supposed to be something more, considering how much effort he puts into humanizing this guy and showing how appalled he is by what he's feeling compelled to do, but, okay, roll it back. Let's start from the beginning. We start with the hero Tech Knight, who is kind of this universe's Iron Man stand-in. But besides the whole billionaire is a hero because of armoured suit thing, he doesn't really bear that much resemblance to him. Batman even less so. Tech Knight is seeing a therapist because he has, out of the blue, developed an uncontrollable urge to put his dick in any hole he sees. And when I say any hole, I mean any hole. I find it quite disheartening that the therapist was perfectly willing to help him out when he thought he'd raped his cat, but when he found out it was his cup, he was like, get out of here, I never want to see you again. I mean, priorities, Doc. But as I said, Ennis really goes out of his way to humanize this guy and make it clear how appalled he is by what his brain is compelling him to do. Meanwhile, Butcher introduces Huey to the legend, who is the person who apparently wrote every comic ever. This is the guy who writes the official versions of the heroes' stories in this world. So the real people get to go off, live like rock stars, ruin other people's lives, and basically worry about nothing except their own image. It's basically the connecting theme throughout all of Ennis's works. There are no heroes. So the legend wants them to look into the death of a kid that might be related to a soup. The death, not the kid. And this is where we differ entirely from the show in structure. The comic is a work with an episodic focus and a serialised storyline in the form of character development, and plot-wise, a powder keg in the form of various power struggles between the boys and the supers in the micro, and the government and the Vought Corporation in the macro, whereas the show is pretty much entirely a serialised story with various long-term arcs running through it simultaneously about a group of anti-hero underdogs trying to take down an evil megacorporation. And my thoughts on both approaches: I believe the former is a much better way to tackle the story of the boys, especially in a show format, if you're going to go beyond maybe 2 seasons. Because when your main story is an inevitable explosion and your through line is a ticking time bomb, there's only so long you can have your audience look at that ticking clock before the anticipation of the bomb starts to lose its impact. But we'll put a pin in that. So the comic is a case of the week structure where the boys take on a soup-related job, try to find out what's going on, and come up with a usually unsavoury solution which compounds Huey's gradually growing disillusionment with the job and the world at large. And this is where we get to see the kind of person Huey Campbell truly is. Because I forgot to mention, he's the main character in the comic. He's not the main character in the show. This case begins with a young lad who died from falling off a building. No proof that it is soup-related, but the legend reckons it's to do with Swinging, a Nightwing-esque superhero and Tech Knight's first sidekick. Billy lists off all the information, and while Huey is definitely listening and taking it all in, his reaction is simply 18. And this is also where Huey's ingenuity is again showcased.
Huey on the TV show is able to display a lot more ingenuity,
as well as how well he and Billy work together. This is also the storyline where we get to see how Ennis tackles prejudice, which is of course one of the major themes of the comic. Huey scolds Billy about how glibly he uses homophobic language, stating that 1, it's just plain unnecessary, and 2, a wee lad's lying there dead. I mean, you seriously have some respect. Interestingly enough, Billy doesn't even seem to register it as a bad word, but acquiesces to Huey's request, however, temporarily. However, and this is where it gets interesting, when they go to a gay bar to interview some people who knew the deceased, Huey is deeply uncomfortable and doesn't want to go in, whereas Billy is perfectly at ease and doesn't see a problem. Rightly so, he calls Huey out on his hypocrisy and they end up going in. They interview a bartender named Paul Drake to learn more about the dead kid, and honestly, I'm not a gay man. Shocking, I know. But this storyline, written by a straight guy about the prejudices that the gay community faces, is really good. People give Ennis shit all the time for his comics being racist or homophobic or whatever, mostly for his frequent use of slurs, which, as far as I can see, serve a purpose within the story. But that is an argument far beyond the scope of this video. Maybe we'll revisit that when it comes time to talk about Stormfront. But besides that, his actual stories and characterization are just disarmingly simple in their humanity. He throws in things about the kid just being at that stage of young adulthood gay men can go through where they are just out, just trying to discover themselves, might not even have told their family yet, some great lines about shallow activism and community outreach, a little playful ribbing like, yeah, I bet you think we've all got great gaydars, but I honestly don't know if this superhero's gay or not. And honestly, a really sad but subtle line about Tech Knight being homophobic, Billy asking how he could tell with all the gear on, and Paul simply saying, "You learn, believe me." Billy and Huey get this guy's trust by just genuinely asking him about the goings-on in his own community, letting him talk at his own pace and listening respectfully. Ennis even throws in a little domestic with the guy's boyfriend, which becomes plot relevant later. Honestly, Paul, this one-off character who only appears in this storyline, is far better written and has infinitely more characterization than so many shallowly inserted gay characters I've seen in media in recent years. With the exclusion of Maeve in the show, who I think was done reasonably well, and despite hanging around till season 3, I think managed to get out before they ruined her too. And I know these sound like basic things, and that's because they are, but you'd be surprised how writers just seem to find this so difficult to pull off. And while the show does do some really interesting stuff with its comments on rainbow capitalism and the like, that is commentary on things that happen in the micro, whereas Ennis's work seems to be genuinely just concerned and interested in how these big things affect people, affect individual communities and the people within them. And that is something else that we will be revisiting when we get to MM, and that one, it really hit me. But the show, on the other hand, seems to have a really cynical outlook on the masses, the people, the ordinary people on the ground, who are the most affected by all the decisions made at the level of power. But yeah, that is something I really noticed when I was writing up the synopsis for this particular storyline, and why I think it resonated with me so much, despite the fact that I think it is the storyline with the most writing problems, which I will be getting into momentarily. It is just genuinely interested in exploring people and how the power at the top trickles down and affects them. Whereas again, the show, if it is concerned with the masses at all, doesn't really tend to have that great of an opinion of them. Seriously, you only see him twice in this storyline, but I really like Paul. I seriously wish he dumped Max. Max doesn't deserve him. Yes, Max, he is too good looking for you. Sorry, that was uncalled for. And we're not done there, because we do get a bit of characterization for MM in this story as well. As he and Huey sit down for a conversation and MM opens up about his own prejudices towards gay men and the prejudice he has received in turn as a black man.
I have read a lot of the Boys comics. I do not like them at all. I think they are a product of their time, and there's a couple of good... Every so often a video will pop up on my recommended that's like, The Boys comics are bad, the show is good. It's hard to describe exactly why, but I would just say, like, don't read The Boys, it's not that good. But the show, I think, is great.
Additionally, in this conversation, Huey asks MM if he's ever killed anyone, and MM instantly knows that he's thinking about Blarney Cock, the soup he accidentally killed in the previous storyline. And Huey has a really, really interesting conversation with Billy about how he feels about it. And I've had this conversation with Punisher fans in particular, and there seems to be this kind of attitude that if they're a terrible person, if they're a killer, if they've touched children, if they've hurt women, you know, I'd shoot them in the face and I wouldn't feel anything. And I'm like, bullshit, yes you would, because people like Billy Butcher and people like Frank Castle are not normal people. That is what makes them so scary, because they can shoot, kill, harm, maim their fellow man and feel nothing. And in Billy Butcher's case, feel glee sometimes. But as humans, we are wired to not find that a pleasant experience. Huey lays this down really, really well. He states that he doesn't really feel as though he needs to be punished or that he's particularly done anything wrong, but he doesn't feel triumphant about it. He doesn't feel like he's done a good thing. Like, he just feels as though it sticks with him. And that is what happens. If you see someone die, let alone be the one to cause that death yourself, that sticks with you. Unless you are a sociopath, being the one to take a life sticks with you. And I find it really interesting how in the show, after the initial shock has worn off, it doesn't really seem to have any effect on Huey. They did this for Frenchie.
I never forget this, you see. She had dirt under her fingernails and calluses on her hands. She was the first person I ever killed. I carry them all with me. It's like scars in a way.
How couldn't they do it for Huey? So yeah, this is a really interesting view on the morality of taking the life of bad people. Yes, there are people in the world whose deaths you are not going to shed tears over, but at the same time, as a normal, good-hearted, compassionate person, you're not going to feel good about killing them. Anyway, Huey's ingenuity is once again on full display.
Huey on the TV show is able to display a lot more ingenuity.
After they find out that the dead kid went to see Swinging before he died, and Tech Knight confesses that he and Swinging fell out over a girl after an ill-advised threesome. And this was the point in the comics where I really started to fall in love with Huey Campbell. People love to brand particular people gay. That guy's so obviously gay, he should just admit it and move on, blah, 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 whatever. But all they're trying to do is look smarter than they actually are. It's not really any more intelligent than we kids calling each other fruits in the school playground. And that's what we've done with Swinging. We're so busy trying to work out whether he's into girls or boys, we haven't stopped to consider whether it's got anything at all to do with his motive. Butcher and Huey go to confront Swinging, and just look at Huey's face. He is furious with this fucker. And if the previous line was what started to make me fall in love with Huey, this is the line that cemented it. 6 months ago, that boy was found lying dead on the fucking street. Do you know the look he had on his face? Misery. Not panic, not fear, misery. Now you tell me what happened that night, or I promise you I will fucking beat the truth out of you, so help me God. After that, Swinging takes off and Huey goes after him.
He also has more of an opportunity to be brave.
Apparently, the kid went to talk to him, and after some empty platitudes about being honest with his feelings, the kid confessed he had a crush on him, and we have good old gay panic. Swinging then spouts some heinous shit about how he really feels, and how, again, the LGBT-friendly image is all corporate branding. Billy says he's going to let him go, but he's going to be their informant, when, in fact, he just sabotages the guy's jetpack. And Huey goes to tell Paul the truth, who then reconciles with Max, who feels genuinely guilty about what happened to the kid because he was the one who suggested he go talk to Swinging in order to get him away from Paul. And Huey begins to reconcile with the world he now finds himself in, and how there isn't any real justice, just cogs in the machine. So, let's get into why I think this is the worst written story. Mostly, it's the Tech Knight stuff. Again, I really don't know what Ennis was going for with this one. I don't really like his humour at the best of times, but it either tends to be throwaway jokes that don't affect anything, or it is interwoven properly with the story. With this, I just don't know. I mean, like I said, Ennis goes out of his way to really humanise this guy and make you feel for him, but the story ends with him dying because he thinks he is saving the world from a meteor by fucking it, but the punchline turns out to be he had a brain tumour. That's what was causing his impulses, and he died from the brain tumour. Honestly, it's framed like a joke, but where's the joke? And how does it service the story in any way? But more interestingly, I think the ending of the main story really lets it down. Because instead of the explanation being gay panic, it could have been something completely unrelated to sexuality, like he accidentally killed this kid in a drug-fueled binge or something like that, because that would have reinforced Huey's line a lot better. I mean, that whole line about we're so obsessed with does he like guys, does he like girls, like gay kids dead, must be gay stuff that got him killed or whatever, but we never actually looked past our own prejudices to ask ourselves, does it actually even have anything to do with that? That is great. But then it turns out that, yeah, it actually did have a whole hell of a lot to do with that. And that really surprises me because Ennis is normally on the ball with his messaging and especially his plotting, because that is one of the great strengths of his writing, and it is a specific skill set that seems to be becoming rarer and rarer among writers these days. Ennis's plots, his characters, his themes, like they all interconnect really, really well. That is why he's such a great writer. Everything about his writing, whether you like it or not, fits, is well done, and makes sense. With this, I am genuinely surprised at the failings of this storyline, and also deeply disappointed because there is so much good in here. But to be honest, that is really the only storyline in this comic book that makes me feel that way. And oh boy, do I have a treat for you with this next one. Moscow shall